evaluation of different strategies to represent performance in a tropical garden does that very thing. And although Elke Reinhuber can't be with us today, I'm pleased to welcome Assistant Professor Ross Williams and also Assistant Professor Benjamin Seide from the School of Art, Design and Media at Nanyang Technical University. So without further ado, thank you very much. Take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'll just quickly share our screen and then we can get going. Whoops, there we go. And yeah, you should be able to see it. Yep. Everyone see that okay? I'm assuming the silence means yes. So thank you again for having us. This is a presentation where we're going to look at two projects that were developed as part of a larger research project dealing with heritage science. And Elke, who's not here, is the principal investigator of that as well. One immersive 360 video work entitled Secret Detours, which we actually presented in a different paper in 2018 in EVA. So some of you, if you happen to have seen it, may have remembered that title. The other is a room scale VR project, which is which is called Flux Garden. And we're going to do a little bit of evaluation of approaches of capturing a garden in VR, and then also how and why we chose to use dances as part of this sort of immersive performance, particularly in terms of driving user engagement. So a little bit of context of the project. Well, yeah. Oh, you were going to say it. Sorry, Ben. Sorry.
Hi, hey. Good afternoon. I'm Benjamin Seide. All right. So the project is part of a larger research heritage project, which we started in 2017. And the initial motivation was the announcement of a complete refurbishment, renovation, restructuring of this beautiful large tropical garden, which is part of our university's campus here in Singapore, NTU's campus. And the garden was built with the opening of the original university in 1955. So it is quite old. And as you can see on the photo, back then it was mostly wide open space. But it already had most of the important structures, like a huge arc welcoming gate, several pavilions, including the center one, and a monument, and of course all the forking path structures. Here is the center pavilion, and in the background, that's the original main building of the university, now the Chinese Heritage Center. Yeah. You want to say something about this one?
Okay, so the drone shot, this is one that we've taken, shows the very distinct characteristic forking path structure of this sort of formal Chinese garden. And just to be clear, we were capturing it partly because of its cultural heritage value and the fact that it was going to be completely changed. So the first project that we did from that was Secret Detours, which is a 360-degree video with ambisonic sound. And in this, we utilized 4 dancers, and we placed them in various places around the garden as a way of capturing that. We used, this was in 2017 when this was first made. And unfortunately, we had very little time from finding out about the redevelopment plans to us being able to get into the garden to do this before they started to destroy it. So it was fairly rushed. So we were sort of a little bit limited in the way we could approach some of it. But it was shot in GoPros with 4K with an 8K output. The dances are significant, how we use them, because the colors of the costume is important. They represent the cardinal colors, the cardinal directions, I should say, in Chinese mythology. So we have the black tortoise, the white tiger, the azure dragon, and the red vermilion bird. And the dancers are forming a sort of a narrative journey throughout the garden. So we've placed them in various points and we've captured them dancing in those points. And then combining that with the music, they suggest some sort of narrative structure, some sort of story. So we'll play a very quick excerpt of that. It's only about 40 seconds. You'll see the end of one location moving into the new location. So that's, again, just a little bit of it. The whole work is about 6 minutes, I think, when it's finished. So after this, our next step, and I leave it over to Ben, was this.
Yeah, so when we shot the 360 video, and when the garden was still intact, we already developed the idea to capture as much footage as possible and to recreate the garden as a room scale experience in which you can freely walk around with the aim to be aiming for photorealism, right? So we were trying to recreate the exact structure of the garden, captured all the detail of the garden as much as possible. So yeah, we try to achieve as much of a fidelity, visible fidelity of the garden. And the next one is one example. We captured tree trunks in the garden to recreate some of the tree trunks of the important ones. And yeah, oops, okay. And other distinctive flora, like here, this is a rain tree, which is very common in Singapore. And it has this fern, which is called epiphytes, plants that grow on other plants, which is also very common. So yeah, we spend a lot of time in with these details. So this is on the right side, you see the auto mosaic map, which is a recreation of drone pictures. And we use that as part of our recreation process to position everything at the exact same location. It is used for measurements, so it's very precise. We used a lot of photogrammetry to recreate, for example, here the stone sculpture, for which we shot 260 photos and combined them. And then you can see the process. The result is a very realistic 3D model. We did that also with other structure in the garden. And while we were working on the VR experience, we revisited the garden, which already became a construction site. And the main structure, like the arc, entrance arc, the monument, pavilions, were still all intact. But many of the very beautiful, lovely trees were cut and locked, and the green was gone. So we were quite devastated. And at that point, we developed a feeling that we need to represent this new reality of the fragmented garden, almost kind of like a memory. We spent so many hundreds of hours in the garden for the first project. And then we developed a new project out of that, which is...
This is, Flux Garden. So this is the second project that we're talking about today. So through the process of creating this sort of photorealistic version, which was the one we were previously talking about, Yunnan VR, we decided to explore the possibilities of visualizing this sort of transient nature of this garden, this transformation, this sort of chaotic destruction of it. And we wanted to do it in a sort of non-realistic kind of impressionistic representation, because all three of us in this project are fundamentally artists before everything else. So through the photogrammetry process, when the rendering is not completely done properly, you get sometimes some very odd abstract and weird shapes, which technically might be considered errors. But we embraced those errors, and then we ended up through that process with, this is a still from this VR experience, where you can see there's a funny green blob there in the middle, which would have been a tree, but through this process transformed itself into this weird structure. And we thought this was a very interesting metaphor for this weird transformation of where the garden was and where it's going to, and then this process. The fundamental structure of the garden, though, remains intact. So the paths are laid out where they're laid, the monuments and everything are still there. And then once this dreamlike kind of version of the garden was completed, we thought, okay, we will, like we did with Secret Detours, we will place dancers or figures within this world to, as a way of, almost using this as a stage.
Right. So in Flux Garden, we employed dancers in a very different way compared to Secret Detours. In Secret Detours, they had more a narrative function. In Flux Garden, the dancers are dispersed throughout the garden and often hidden inside this abstract blob. So you, as a user, you have to discover them. So it's kind of more like a mission to find all these dancers in this dreamlike world. So as you can see, we started with a motion capture process. We have a motion capture stage, YCOM stage here at our school. This is screen recording from Motion Builder, Autodesk Motion Builder, which we use for the cleanup process. We captured the original dancers who also perform in Secret Detours. The same dancer and the same choreographer worked on this. The next stage was the look development. What we actually, how would we represent the dancers in the garden? And after a couple of tests, we tested with some bodies covered with leaves and things like that, more related to a garden. We settled on a more dreamlike appearance, which we thought would represent to one degree the process of the disintegration of the garden, and in another way also we wanted something a little bit ghostly. As we see these dancers, they're like as Ross already said, the blobs are basically trees from the photogrammetry process rendered wrongly, and we see the dancers as a kind of like ghost spirit of the tree living inside this blob. Okay. Yeah.
So a little bit now about how we approach. So as we mentioned, the dancers are dispersed around and hidden inside these weird objects and so on. For instance, this is a blue dancer inside the main pavilion. And now in terms of how we arrange them within the garden, this is a top-down look at the various, the squares represent dancer positions, and the white dotted lines represent the attenuation curves of the sound, because every dancer has its own unique music. And as you are navigating through this, we're enticing you like a siren song to enter these weird spaces and find your way around the garden. And it took a lot of work and a lot of effort to get these attenuation curves right and the EQ curves and everything right. So as you're walking around, in one ear, you'll hear the whispers of one piece of music and you might follow that, or you might in the other ear see it the other way, or as you turn around, it was all positional, of course. And just as a navigational tool, this was important. Without it, the users would not necessarily find their way easily around this garden. It is quite sort of abstract in the way it's designed. But anyway, here's our run through, so you can see what we're talking about. So that's just the short piece.
Yeah, okay. So, of course, this is a capture from a virtual reality walkthrough. So I just want to say like two things. Of course, Ross already pointed out the map with all the dancers. So in total, we have 13, 14 dancers in there. So we only featured a couple of them in the video. Secondly, of course, the big sensation or the wow thing here is the stereoscopic vision in the VR headset. So of course you can walk into the particle cloud of the dancer, and that's very impressive, yeah, or very engaging, let's say. Yeah. Then conclusions.
Yeah. I think we're just about on time. So very briefly, we've tried to sort of present our evaluation of these two approaches, and obviously in the 360 linear video, it's a very different experience than in a VR environment. Naturally, in the video, our user has essentially the same experience more or less as every other user, certainly from the sound perspective, and even visual. So they don't get a lot of movement around. And as we all know, in the VR experience, it's really quite different because they can spend as long or as little amount of time at any one moment. What they hear will be different for every user, how they integrate it. And the music itself was written in such a way that all pieces of music relate to each other. So if you hear all of the pieces, then you get the sense of a meta kind of piece. So that was part of the design. And we're still tweaking on working on improving how the navigation and things like that work. But it becomes this sort of interesting experience, and the user feedback, especially of Flux Garden, has been very positive, especially once they got the hang of the idea of what they were looking for. It's been quite an interesting experience. And then the use, obviously, of motion capture dancers gave us a lot of flexibility in terms of how we could employ them. Ben, you want to answer?
Yeah, I think you summed it up quite nicely. I mean, we have, maybe I should add, we have basically both gardens also without dancers, right? We didn't compare this in this paper. We basically compared different approaches of using dancers as a way of engagement for either 360 or room scale VR. When we showed the empty garden as 360 photos, 360 videos, the people looked a little bit at the structure, but what were simply not very engaged. With the 360 dancers in the garden, the attention was very much on the dancers actually, and the focus was a little bit less on the garden. And for the virtual reality version, we have actually 3 versions. Elke also made one interactive I Ching version, which is more like a puzzle. And we have the realistic looking garden. And finally, we have this more of an artistic interpretation of a garden, where the dancers again more serve as an entertaining and mission to engage.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was our last slide. Thank you
very much. We are just hitting our limit there. If you have any questions, if you could put them into the chat. I think we've got time for about 2 while we queue up the next speaker. But I'd just like to say how fascinating that was, and I found that especially evocative to see that VR reconstruction, definitely, of the now vanished garden. Thank you. So yes, any questions in the chat? We'll have time to answer a couple, but I'm going to talk now to Hannes as we get the next presentation sorted out. Hannes, are you there?
No questions.